Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Nice to meet
Really
you.
excited that we could finally speak, and I'm so happy that you agreed and
Of course.
you took out the time.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
of course. This is my first Instagram live. I don't even think I've done an Instagram story before. So I
okay.
feel, yeah, I'm glad I was able to get on and that this is working. And now people are
Yeah,
watching us. Is that right?
yeah, it's perfect, and there are a lot of people here who are looking forward to it, and I'm so happy to be conducting this on behalf of the Indian Women Cinematographers Collective. It was our idea to get inspiration from filmmakers all over the world, and your journey is so interesting. I mean, I've followed your work, and a lot of us have taken inspiration from it,
That's so
and
kind.
so I'll just get straight to
I'm
it.
very flattered. I'm incredibly flattered. That means a
Um,
lot.
we are flattered that you are here with us. I'll go straight to the beginning of your
Yeah,
journey, um,
sure.
because you didn't go to a film school, and you went to Columbia, and you studied philosophy.
I'm so impressed
So,
how much you know about me already, by the way.
because when I saw your films, I mean, there is a very your films are very surreal, and they have certain bit of philosophy in every which manner, and that kind of got me to dig into your background, and I saw that you have studied philosophy, and I was wondering that, do you inculcate that in your films, or does it just come up naturally?
I think I probably my favorite thing about making films is getting to be an armchair philosopher. In some ways, I get to do all the fun of philosophy without having to do like the hard work of rigorous analytical philosophy of like writing, sort of essays for the philosophical community. In some ways, I was a little like I loved studying philosophy at Columbia, but it didn't quite feel like a fit for me because in success, I might only end up, even if I was somehow like very successful philosopher, you're still talking to a very small group of people who are all kind of speaking your language. And I always wanted to speak to more people than that. And also I was kind of drawn to more poetic philosophy, maybe in the more like continental tradition, I guess you could say. Even though I liked the rigors of like an analytical philosophy, I just at the end of the day didn't feel it was satisfying enough. So I guess yeah,
and
I do try to bring that to my movies.
and the journey to your first film, The Midnight Swim.
Mm-hmm.
If you can share with us how you went about making it, and also you followed something which is, quite unusual, which is, I mean, of course, there are a lot of things which were new with that film, but something like a scriptment is what you
Yeah,
followed. And
yeah.
how did you decide to go that way?
I never thought I would be. Yes, both the Midnight Swim and Buster's Malhart were made off of scriptments, which in the case of the Midnight Swim was like a 25-page outline. And in Buster's Malhart, I think it was maybe like a 62-page outline. And it was never how I intended to set out making films. I began by writing fully fleshed out scripts. But it just so happened the Midnight Swim was born out of the ashes of a film project that fell apart and really kind of broke my heart. And when that film fell apart, there was money had already been spent on casting and locations and some prep work, and so I had to kind of rally and figure out what could we make in like in 2 months with a tiny bit of money. And what was born out of that was just this like, well, let's go make this micro budget improv movie. And it turned out to be, it's an incredibly rewarding way to work. I really hope to get back to that soon
Right.
because the whole cast and crew, everybody's on their toes. There's no sort of safety net of the script to fall back on. And it really forces the brains to be alive and all working together to decide like what is the movie we're making and what is this scene about, and keeps everybody just fired up and in a process of discovery all day long.
And if you don't mind sharing, what was the budget, the production budget for your for Midnight's film?
$50,000, which we scraped together through a combination of Kickstarter and my husband, who's my cinematographer, my half Indian husband cinematographer. I feel like I should go
Oh,
visit
that,
him the other room when he should be in this conversation at some point. But
yeah.
he he and I put in some money, and then we were able to convince some amazing, super generous investors to take a risk on us and give us, these small investments to help put the budget together.
Right. I mean, just to give a context to our audience in India who are watching the show now and will be seeing it later, $50,000 roughly translate to about 37 lakh, which is
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of money. I mean, even for here, it's
Mm-hmm.
quite a challenge to, like pull off a film in that kind of a budget. And uh, I mean, since you mentioned your husband, Shaheen is the cinematographer,
Mm-hmm.
and your association dates back from your first short film, I believe. Since you are the writer, director, producer, often for your films. So the film is fairly fleshed out in your mind already.
Mm-hmm.
So then how do you go on, collaborating with your cinematographer, and what does the cinematographer
Mm-hmm.
bring to the plate?
Mm. Well, Shaheen is like, other than Jonico Donley, who's my longtime creative producer. I mean, Jonico and Shaheen are my key, like my cornerstone creative partners, and are involved really at every step of the way. So they're both reading drafts as I'm going. So maybe Shaheen and I have a relationship that is maybe unusual in terms of a director cinematographer relationship, because I'm bouncing things off of him all the time. But then that's sort of almost a different relationship than when I'm ready to really talk to him as a cinematographer. And in that case, I like to sort of every project is a little bit different, but generally I like to sort of have the vision for the movie in my mind first, sometimes even shot list by myself first, just to get a sense of really like, how do I see this movie? And then he kind of does that on his own too. And it's nice to work separately for a second. And then we come together with the ideas and talk through the script scene by scene, and challenge each other. And it's great because it's really because he cares just as much as I do. So it's like just a battle of two passionate people fighting to make the best movie. And usually out of that, some even better third idea is born. And then, of
Right.
course, as you guys all know, being cinematographers yourself, it's like then you get there on the day and reality plays all kinds of exciting tricks on you. And it's about discovering what is the best magic you can create on that day. So even though all that preparation was important and all those shot lists are important, you have to be prepared to throw them away
Hmm.
if you need to be nimble and adjust for whatever's happening with the actors or whatever's happening with the time constraints. So
Right. And
it,
also
it
with the, sorry,
Oh no, go
go
ahead. I was
ahead.
just gonna say it's just I think like on this last movie. So I'm in the midst of making my new film Birds of Paradise, and we were shut down just with 7 days left in our production because of this pandemic. And
Right.
what I was gonna say is one thing that Shaheen was so crucial for in making this movie. It was so ambitious, and there was so many different moving parts and factors and personalities. And it was so great to have Shaheen as a touchstone to remind me really the language, the cinematic language of the movie we set out to create, and just a sort of like gentle reminder of like, okay, we know we've got all these crazy factors going on, but let's slow down for a second and remember what we set out to do.
What were your thoughts when, the production was stalled just 7 days before finishing? And how
Yeah.
do you plan to go about it? And, what's your plan now?
It was really, it was really hard because, of course, we had to shut down because 5 out of the 7 days we had left to shoot on this film involved crowds. So there was really no safe, responsible way to keep shooting, and it had to be done. So really mixed feelings because it was relief because we really shouldn't have been shooting at that point, and it was glad to be back in LA to quarantine here rather than Budapest. And so lots of positives. at the same time, of course, it was incredibly heartbreaking because, as you guys know, it just takes so much to make a movie. It's so hard to get them off the ground. And I had been really kind of in sprint mode on this film ever since July. And full throttle, just and we were so close to the finish line. And so and you know that sweet spot with the crew where you just finally found your rhythm and you're just starting to be really fun and organic, and we were kind of like right in the middle of that feeling, and it was so hard to leave just as we had really found our groove. And we were preparing for the momentum of the last 7 days were kind of our hardest days because I wanted to make sure we were in our groove when we approached those 7 challenging days. And so we were so just ready to take that on. And so it was hard to have the plug pulled right at that moment. And then knowing that we have to then kind of ramp back up into some of the hardest stuff once production gets up again. In the meantime, because I'm a writer too, I now am trying to look at this creatively of how do I finish this movie in a way, and I'm not going to be able to do crowd scenes, and it's tricky because 23 days are already in the can, and these crowd scenes were really integral to the story. So I'm really looking at it now as this Rubik's Cube as a writer of how can I tell a story that's as good or better than what we set out to do, but do it within these new restrictions, which, no one completely knows what they're going to be yet, but obviously there's not going to be 200 extras. Right. We're going to have a tinier crew. And so I've just, knock on wood, we'll see what happens. I just finished a draft yesterday that feels really good to me. So given that a few days to meditate on and see if that'll work. And then if I do end up feeling like that's a draft that'll work, then we'll put that production plan into motion. And go from there. Yeah.
These are really difficult times, and I think most of us are in the dark as to how things are going to go on moving forward, at least for quite some time to come. And I mean, I can't imagine that people
What's the vibe in India right now?
It is pretty uncertain. I mean, we are taking each day as it is coming, and every day something new is being revealed, and at least everybody, at least from our line of work, is thinking that how can we first, when is it going to start again? And also, it's not going to be easy, even when let's say officially you are allowed to start, but then how do you go on about it? Because people, there is this looming threat, which will be there for quite some time. So, there are guidelines that are coming, and
do you feel, especially within your collective, is there a really vibrant kind of like indie movie scene where people are making films with tiny crews already? Is that sort of already exist? I'm curious because I have a movie that we were supposed to shoot in India, which India is so close to my heart. It's a longer story, but in some ways I feel like I should just be moving there and living in India. Now obviously with this pandemic, it's much more unlikely that we'll be shooting that movie in India anytime soon. And so I'm actually thinking of rewriting it for closer to home, which is sad.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, we would love it for you to come here and, do something here as well, and bring some of your philosophy, explore it here. I mean, in India, yes, there have been shoots. There is an indie, indie filmmaking culture here as well, which is blooming these days. And there are some really amazing films that are coming out of here, and doing really well in the festivals. And so yeah, I mean, that promise is there, and I think executing indie films, so to say, with a smaller crew and everything, might be the easier thing to do for some time, and would be the way to go. And then there are always a lot of documentaries which are done, and as much as possible people should document these times, is what
It's
I'm
just
sure.
particularly, it's like, I think it's a particularly exciting time for new filmmakers, I think,
Yeah, yeah, I
because
agree.
we,
Hmm.
as audiences, we're more hungry than ever for movies and for
Right,
TV series, and as some, for people who are like just starting off, it's actually quite exciting because productions need to be small and nimble. So it's kind of almost a perfect time if you're sort of just starting your career to be making these smaller movies. And it's really like the seller's market. Like the networks and distributors are going to want to buy stuff because so many productions are shut down. So it's kind of
right.
great timing for lots of reasons, I think.
I think that is the silver lining. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can spot one,
Yeah.
um, but at least for another, at least for over here for another month, that's also a little tricky,
Mm.
because we have a severe lockdown that has been imposed, and so it's not. But yeah, I mean, there's already content that is coming out, or a shorter duration content, and I'm sure
Hmm.
a lot of filmmakers are already in the process of figuring out something to make with these restrictions. Even I'm planning a few things, and let's see.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
It's a
hopefully
good time to
something will.
write. It's also just a good time to dream up ideas. I'm so curious to know more about your collective. So you guys, oh, sorry, I lost you for a second.
Yeah.
So you guys are all cinematographers, and were you friends before, or did you just find each other through this collective?
Some of us knew each other. So right now in this collective, so we have a group, and there are quite a lot of women. Officially, there are about 32 women who are part of it, and then there are a
Right.
lot of newer people who have also joined. And in total, there are about some 90 odd people, in the group.
Fantastic. And you
So
guys exchange
yeah,
gear and like sort of exchange crew recommendations and support each
yeah,
other's.
yeah.
Great.
Totally. I mean, that was the idea, was to get to know, because a lot of times uh, the scenario that we face is that we're not even aware that who's out there. And if you go on sets, or on a shoot, then the regular thing that you will hear is that, oh, you're the first female cinematographer that we are seeing, and there aren't many. But then, as we made the effort amongst ourselves to kind of know each other, there are so many, and the idea is to make them more visible, give them, give us, bring us up, basically out there, and get people to notice. And
Fantastic.
yeah, I mean, and that is where we also want to, take in, because the journey is hard in general for everybody.
Hmm.
And it just helps, I think, to know. uh, Also, often what happens that uh, you don't get success immediately, right? I mean, um, I'm sure you know that pretty well. I mean, your journey has been pretty
Long.
long,
Yeah.
long, and
Yeah.
with a lot of ups and downs. And but the idea is to not give up, and the
Yeah.
idea is to go on. And I think that's one of the reasons why we felt that we need to speak to more filmmakers
Yeah.
whose journey has been long. And
Yeah.
also, um, I mean, coming to this conversation, it's also because we are not, cinematography doesn't work in solitude. It
Yeah.
always works in tandem with different people. And without that, without a successful association with the director, or a production designer, or other team members, it's not possible to bring the best.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
yeah, that was
Yeah. Well, I'm I'm happy to just answer anybody's questions about anything really. But you're right. My personal journey um, has been a very long and sort of winding road, but I do feel in some ways grateful that it's not like my career kind of came easy, because I think that it's sometimes if things come too easy to you, that can be a curse, and you stop learning and stop being curious and stop challenging yourself. And so I've always, you know, because it sort of has been a series of steps forward and steps back, that I think it's caused me to work even harder and sort of trust my own judgment even more, because a lot of my early films, you know, for example, The Sirens, which was my first sort of serious short film. I had made other short films before, but that was the first one that I really kind of put investment into. And it was such a heartbreak to when we sent it out to festivals, and it really didn't get much love at festivals. It really showed it only a handful, and it was so heartbreaking and kind of a gut punch. And, but like from that, it just made me kind of work even harder on the next thing. And even with The Midnight Swim, like, to be totally honest, I'm very proud of that movie, but, you know, we still haven't even recouped the small budget that it's so hard. It's so hard to make the film, but then also get it distributed. And it did well at festivals, but it also didn't skyrocket. And so, you know, each step has been like, it gets me to the next step, but it's not like I've like taken some giant leap.
Right.
But I find that has made me really like quite strong and kind of self-sufficient in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those experiences do give us a learning, and you know, that's how we take it forward. And I mean, I wanted to know specifically about your learnings from shooting with a scriptment, because what
Sure.
I also found, for example, let's say when we are on a tighter budget, you know,
Yeah.
we have to. We often hear that you have to plan things to the T so that you know where your money is going, and you know all of that, to let everybody from the crew know what exactly they are supposed to do, you know, other than the actors. Um, so, but you shot your first film
Yeah.
without
Yes.
that.
I was gonna say yes, and it doesn't. So yes, you preparation is so important. But like, yeah, the first film I did, we weren't. We were sort of, I know, it's almost like emotional prep, and there was a lot of prep that went into it, but it was like we weren't making shot lists so much, and it wasn't like storyboarded. It was a scriptment, and so we were figuring it out on the day, which was a really beautiful process. Now that first movie is the entire movie is an emotional POV. So it gave us a lot of like restrictions at the outset, because it's funny. I realize I keep looking up this way. It's because there's a poster of the first movie that way, so that's why my eye line keeps going that way. But it's an emotional POV movie, and it gives us some sort of restrictions on how the cinematography should reflect that. So every choice we made, we asked ourselves, what is the character June feeling? And based on what she's feeling, where would she point the camera, and what would she want to look at? And the reason is because it's like, you know, she's using the camera as a defense mechanism. So she's not always framing the action perfectly. Sometimes she's looking at the floor, or like, you know, looking at some object when somebody else is talking off screen. And it gave us a really like beautiful kind of rule by which to structure the film and discover the film. So as we were improvising it with the actors, Shaheen was really kind of another performer, because he was also operating. We had a crew of 7 people. It was tiny. So he was cinematographer / operator / gaffer, you know, like everything.
Right.
And he really became, we like to say that he and Lindsay Burge, who played the character of June, together played the character of June, because he was the character's eyeballs. And it became a collaboration between the lead actress, Shaheen, and myself. Sometimes I would bring her behind the camera and say, like, you know what? Give Shaheen a tap if you feel like the character would be looking kind of over there, or looking at this thing. We wanted to make the camera feel like we were inside of her head and looking through her eyeballs.
Right. There was a fellow cinematographer who just popped in a question while we were speaking about at what point do you involve your cinematographer? So maybe she missed that portion
That's
when
okay. I'll ask again.
when
Yeah, Ariel,
when
I'll say
you
it.
mentioned, yeah.
Sure. Well, so I'm very lucky because I'm married to the cinematographer who I collaborate with the most. So I probably get way more prep time than most directors because I can just bother him whenever I want. And he is involved at a very early stage because as my husband, he's watching me go through the writing process. So he's reading drafts and we're talking, you know, my key creative collaborator in that respect. But I sort of don't really use his cinematographer brain until I'm ready as a director. When I get out of writing brain and I go into more directing brain, and I like at that point I like to have my almost my first pass alone with my own thoughts, and I like to sort of visualize what the movie's going to be. Sometimes that might be shot listing, sometimes not, and then he does the same usually, and then we come together once we've each had a chance to think separately, and then we fight it out and may the best idea win.
Right. And since you're also the editor for your project, how much of it changes? Because, you know, I mean, how do you go about editing the project that you've written and directed? You know?
Yeah, I love editing. It's actually something that is difficult for me right now because since I've gone from indie films to my first studio movie, I can't edit because it's a union film and I'm not in the editors union, and I miss editing so much. So I'm hoping to eventually join the editors union so I can edit my own films again because that part of the process is really crucial to me. But it's great as a director to have an editor's brain because, and even for, especially for non-script, goes back to your original question about working with scriptments rather than full scripts. Because then when you're looking at the scene on the day as an editor, you can kind of understand if you have what you need to cut something together and like what sort of coverage you might need based on the improvisation that the actors are doing. And then, but you know, it's also a process of discovery in the edit, and things really do change a lot. The heart of the story never changes, I think. That has to live on the page and in performances. But then you certainly, in some ways, the vast majority of filmmaking really does happen in the edit. Once you've got, you know, all these ingredients, like I'm sure people have used this metaphor a lot, but it's like you're getting all your ingredients and you're harvesting all this great stuff, but then in the edit you're cooking. In the edit you're taking all that great stuff and then you're figuring out what's the actual rhythm and chemistry of this thing as it all comes together.
Right. But as a director, does that make you too fixed with your ideas because everything is so nicely etched out in your mind? Or are you like...
I hope not. I'm very not precious. I hope not. You know, I try to be open to surprises and to what cast and crew, like I really love ideas that come from anywhere. Good ideas can really come from anywhere. So I try to be open to that. And definitely in the edit, the most challenging thing in the edit is to watch a movie with fresh eyes because you have to watch it so many times in the course of making it. But I do my best to kind of clear my brain and watch it with fresh eyes like an audience might watch it. And every time, this always happens. I think it might be a law of the universe. You can't, for me, it's like every project, I can't finish that project without having to sacrifice my favorite shot every time. It's like whatever is my most precious baby, the shot that I love the most, inevitably is like the offering to the gods in order to finish the movie. And it's just a weird thing I found. It's like it needs to take its pound of flesh from you or something.
I thought that kind of thing mostly happens with cinematographers, where the shots where they put in the most effort is normally edited out. I mean, I didn't know that the directors face the same
It's not
plight.
because I want to. It's not because I want to. It's because you at some point have to humble yourself before the story and like humble yourself before what the movie needs. And it's not about you and it's not about your ego. So then you have to unfortunately sometimes say, okay, in order to prove to the universe it's not about my ego, here's my favorite child, you know.
I have another fellow cinematographer. I'll take their names. Earlier one was asked by Pooja, and this one is Dhavlika. She is asking if you followed the scriptment approach even in your studio film that you did, that you are...
No, No, but I would like to go back and do. I would like to go back to a script. And I have another project I'm writing right now with a friend that's in a scriptment form. Um, but no, this latest studio film is fully scripted, and it was a more traditional way of working with a giant union crew, really tough schedule, and it's beautiful process in its own right. But I am longing to get back to the type of project that's smaller and more about discovery on the day. It's almost like I feel sometimes the bigger the crew, the harder it is to pivot, and
Right.
so that's not always true if you're a famous enough director that the producers don't care if you go overtime or something. Maybe that's not the case, but I'm still I gotta make my days. Like I don't go overtime, and I'm sort of respectful of the budget and the crew and the time and stuff. So for that reason, it's a little bit harder to create the anything can happen discovery vibe on those bigger studio kind of union shoots. But with a small group of people, like with the Midnight Swim, with our crew of 7, it's so much easier if you're like, you know what? Let's just scrap what we were gonna do, and you know what? Let's just go do this elsewhere, and
Right.
let's start over. Let's rethink this whole thing. That's hard, much harder to do if there's 150 people.
But
That
but you have actually taken a leap while you are, also. I mean, I think that you still. Um, okay, there are two thoughts in my mind. One is that having seen your work, from early on, I think you've maintained the basic essence, your voice in
mm,
all those films.
mm,
And, at the same time, you have taken a leap to, you know, bigger project. Like you've directed an episode for Legion,
mm-hmm,
for Hannah, for
mm-hmm,
Looking for Alaska. So you have done all these bigger projects. So
mm-hmm.
is it still with you that, you aren't given that leeway of doing whatever that you want, as in, or maybe
I
whichever
don't know,
way.
not yet, not yet. I mean, or maybe I'm overly conscientious and just need to be a little bit more of a bastard and just say like, fuck you guys, I'm doing whatever I want. But I not yet. I don't even know if that's the goal so much, but um, I I think like a producer too is the thing. I'm a director, but I also think like a producer, and so I'm constantly also trying to balance. Like I'm very aware the resources that are available, and I always want to put as much of that on screen and make sure we get the most bang for our buck too. So I feel responsible in that way. I know some directors. It's sort of, I think, kind of a luxury to just like be unaware of the budget, but I feel I do my best work if I sort of am in a producer's mindset too, and then can be um, very aware of how we're allocating our resources to make sure we get the best movie at the end of the day.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, I personally think that that's a great quality to have because any resources should never be, utilized without giving, a lot of thought to it. And I think, it always helps if you are able to save on time, if you're able to save on money, maybe you can put that to use somewhere else in a
Yeah.
much better manner.
Yeah.
There,
I know you
there was,
cinematographers must have been excited about Legion. I know you had written me that you wanted to ask about that. Talk about a fun show to shoot and so like wildly experimental and that's why I met Dana Gonzalez, who is an amazing cinematographer, who then I went on to work on Hannah with, and we've had such a great collaboration.
right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, Legion is quite a path-breaking show, and there are a lot of people who are fans of it. But how was your experience of shooting such a big uh,
It was so
show?
honestly, the first day that I worked or that I walked onto the soundstage of Legion, I nearly shit my pants because I was like,
Right,
"Oh God, this is so exciting!" But it was also so much bigger than anything I had worked on before. Um,
right,
and uh, it was such a, every job I've done has been a huge learning curve in a great way. And what I think is really fun about Legion is Noah Hawley, the creator, he really just kind of trusts the directors and takes a kind of a hands-off approach. So it's really empowering, actually. It's not, it wasn't a situation where you have a showrunner sitting right behind you the whole time. He really was like, here's the script, surprise me, do something I wouldn't have thought of. And that was a great feeling.
And the setup of the show, they are really experimental, and also sometimes very large scale, and sometimes it's a little, when you think about it, I mean, seeing that, it can feel a little overwhelming to be executing that. I mean, did you face anything like that with
I
your
didn't feel
cinematographer?
overwhelmed. Yeah, no, I mean, Dana and I had such a great collaboration, and what I loved about working with Dana on Legion and then subsequently on Hannah is he's just down for any challenge. Like, he was never afraid of any challenge, and he was such a great teammate. If we were ever in a pickle, we would just buckle down and figure it out together. And he's like wonderfully experienced, so he really knows how to problem solve on the fly, which was great. I
Right.
don't know. I don't know, to answer your question, if there was anything too completely overwhelming. But I think also I do thrive under pressure, and I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. So I think I do good work when I feel the fire.
Right. I mean, I think that's an amazing quality to have. I mean, that's the only way I think you can probably survive through those moments when you really need to be up and about, and figure things out and
I think
plan
all
them.
of you, I think everybody in your collective must have a little bit of that, because I think cinematographers must be adrenaline junkies too, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that is true. Um, there were two questions. I'm just going to address them, but maybe we can take them again later.
Mm-hmm.
One was, I think, one was asked by David, and it was about how do you think that filmmaking is going to change post-COVID. We had briefly touched upon it in the beginning,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but maybe we can end the conversation with that.
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
and the other thing was asked by Jennifer. I think that was a fun question, but I also, think that it's a good question. That how do two geniuses live together? How do they?
That's so nice. Jeez. Oh, that's so nice.
Uh,
I mean, I like, my marriage is the most like kind of beautiful, and it's wonderfully easy, I guess, and most of the time. It's obviously not without its challenging moments, but I feel very lucky, kind of like I won the lottery and live with the person I love the most and who is a fellow creative. And so Shaheen is also so creative. So like all day long during this lockdown, he's been drawing or making music or gardening. It's just really inspiring to live with another artist. And he understands when I come in here to my office and lock myself in for 10 hours at a time and I'm cranky and don't want to talk to him because I'm in writing mode. So it's, I think, really the best of both worlds. And before I was at this stage in my career where I was able to make a living as a director and writer, Shaheen and we had a business together, a graphic design business. So we're so
right.
used to collaborating, and our relationship is based on a creative collaboration. We've never not been in some sort of artistic conversation back and forth with each other. So I actually think it's kind of built in to the DNA of this relationship.
Yeah, I think that there's nothing more beautiful than when you're able to collaborate also with your partner in a very organic manner. I think it's a real blessing, and I hope
Yeah.
that both of you continue to have that.
I know you guys must feel this too. Like in our job, we do so much traveling around
Hmm.
the world
Right.
now to shoot. Well, I don't know anymore, but we used to. And so it's nice, like with this last film, that he could come shoot it and we can actually be together rather than being apart for
Right.
months at a time.
Right. So there was another question.
I'm just now realizing I'm like slow. I've never done with these Instagram live things and seeing all these comments. I see Jen LaFleur. She's
Yes.
watching. I just saw a comment. Hey, girl.
And
She's the
there was,
star of the Midnight Swim, you guys, is watching this feed.
yeah, I know. I mean, I was when I saw that, that's why I thought that, the question is fun and sweet, and I must take it also because it's, Jennifer's question.
Oh, I just
Uh,
realized that was the Two Geniuses thing was, of course, that was from Jen LaFleur. That's
yeah,
hilarious.
that was her. And there was another question from Dhavlika about. I mean, we have touched upon it, but I think we'll uh, get into it again. Also, uh, even though you are the writer, director, and the editor, and you're collaborating, your cinematographer on those difficult projects has been your husband. Um, do you still have to, let go of your imagination at points because of practical issues and scenarios? And how hard is
Yeah,
it for you?
he's dying. I should plug in. 1 second.
That's okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty nimble. I don't get too precious, and I feel like I'm pretty good at adjusting on the fly to like the needs of the situation. Um,
Right.
so hear me? I'm sorry.
I can.
Should have
I
tried my
can hear
phone.
you. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, now
I
I
think
hear
you'll
you
have
turning
to.
the other way. Is this okay?
Yeah.
I'll go do
Well,
this.
um, is it possible to turn it, or
Yeah,
is it?
I
Is
just
it?
I can't. I guess I can hold it. I can hold it like that. Okay, it's fine. Um, sorry. So what were we
Okay.
talking about? Yeah.
I was saying that when you're imagining your stories, and how much of it do you have to sometimes also, because you think like a producer. So when
Mm-hmm.
you're writing, do you restrict yourself with putting
Mm-mm.
out your ideas that, okay, maybe this will be difficult to execute? And so
Mm-mm.
how much of,
Try not to
yeah,
restrict myself when I'm writing so much.
right,
Well, it depends. It depends. Maybe sometimes, but I try to be like to not think like a producer while I'm writing because I think good writing is more of a channeling process, and you want to just like sort of let flow what needs to flow, and then maybe in the rewrite process, maybe then I could start to think like a director producer of like what is really we're gonna be able to execute well. But I try to put on different brains at different times. And like when I'm in director mode, when I'm really in director mode and on set, then it's really just all about the cinema that we're creating that day and my relationship with the actors and the scene
right,
work. And I don't bring my producer brain to that so much, but I've got a producer brain once in a while being like, okay, you have to make a quick decision based on are you going to go do this, are you going to do this, and you don't have time for both, and sort of being aware of that, and then so it's and not completely unaware of the constraints, but I really want to make sure that when I'm doing the scene work with the actors, that I'm just as present as they are, and just kind of being more pure director mode.
and has it ever happened with you that when you've shot the film and you've almost edited it, and something, what you want to come out from the film is not really, when you, let's say, show any kind of a, a rough draft to somebody? I don't know if you do that. Do you do
Yeah.
that? Like, do you
Yeah.
do you,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Screenings to friends for sure.
and
Um,
if you don't get a feedback in the sense that what you're trying to say is coming across, do you, how much of change, how do you decide how much you're going to change to let that come, and how do you decide that no, you're going to stick to how you want to say it rather than
it's
catering to?
it's really hard. It's really hard. Post is torture. Like for me,
Right,
post is real torture because until the movie is all the way done, it just bothers me until it's right, and it's very hard to because you want it's important to me to get feedback from smart people, but then you also have to kind of filter that and remember that sort of take the notes that are most useful to you, but also remember that some of those notes might be coming what they might be coming from a place of what they would do if it was their film, which is not always the same thing. So I don't know if there's any real sort of secret formula other than not being so stubborn that you don't listen when there's a real problem. Because if a ton of people are saying the same thing, then oftentimes that's something that's worth addressing. Um, and they can sometimes be wrong. So I don't know. It's really hard and tortures me.
Right. Tell us something about, because Buster's Malhart is a film that is available on Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, there's a lot of the structure is very fragmented of
Mm-hmm.
that film.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that did you achieve in your writing stage, and how much of that did you achieve in your editing, or was it written like pretty much like
It was
that?
actually pretty. I'm pretty sure that it follows the script fairly closely structurally. I don't think there was any
Right,
like monumental structural changes. There were storylines that we had to cut out, which was
right,
a shame. I was saying the stuff you have to sacrifice. Some of my favorite stuff we actually had to cut out because there just wasn't room for it, or because it ended up coloring our feeling about the character in a way that was too strong. And it was really, I really wanted to maintain that balance for the character where you really love and care about him and sort of believe in his heart despite whatever happens. And so we were walking a really kind of thin tightrope in that, and therefore had to make sacrifices in some of like our favorite scenes or favorite shots in order to make sure that we were serving that character's story best. But I think, I haven't gone back and really looked at the script versus or script meant versus the edit to see structurally how much was changed, but it was always meant to be a story where um, we were telling in the story in different timelines and cutting back and forth between them. So I think a lot of that was already on paper.
right. Um, and coming back to the scriptment, like, because you don't have a short list or things like that with you, right?
For Buster,
When you're
I think
working
I
with a
did shot list. I mean, but I think I would, a lot of times with Buster, we were shooting all day, and then I would be like finalizing the shot list that night and sending it out sort of that night. So I had done a bunch of prep, but then you learn as you go what's working and what's not, and you're sort of discovering the language of the film. So even though I think I had shot listed the whole movie before we started, then I was re-shot listing every night. And
right.
then also, and
And
then the next day when we would shoot, just sometimes scrapping the shot list if something didn't work.
and how does it go with your other team members? When they have to, let's say, your production designer who has to make a, you know,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
who has to prep, and
mm-hmm.
even others for that matter. How do they respond to it?
Um, I think that it's the process of making a film is the process of having one ongoing conversation with people that's like a really like lovely and often very philosophical conversation. So like with anyone that I hire or want to collaborate with, we're starting with making sure we have a shared understanding of what's at the heart of this movie. Um, and
Right.
then you know a lot of times I'm looking for insight from them, from what do you see um, is the heart of this movie, and we're sort of making sure that we're on the same page, that we're making the same film, um, and then checking back in with each other every step of the way. But it really just depends. Like on the Midnight Swim, there was no production designer because we didn't have one. So that was like the production design was my mom and my grandma, because that's their family cottage, and I just was always so inspired by that beautiful space. So I think we like moved a couple of pieces of furniture once in a while. Probably the actors were helping me like throw some pillows or like move a few objects here and there, but for the most part we really didn't touch it. And then on Buster's Malhart, Alexis Rose, who we actually found Alexis working on a short I did called Mother's Day, which is part of a horror feature anthology.
I loved it. That
Oh,
that was that
thank
was amazing.
Thank you. So I started working with Alexis as production designer on that project, and then brought her on to Buster. And she has such a great, wonderful way. She kind of thinks like I do in terms of, I almost like call it like working from the inside out. It's a lot of like intuition, also planning and, careful design, but working very organically. And she will put together, like, because I'll put together mood boards for my film, and then she, for both Mother's Day and Buster, sort of did her own passive mood boards, and then we're really just exchanging images and kind of building the film together through these shared visual language. And then she was on Buster, you know, the person who came out and did all the scouting with me. So for that film, Shaheen wasn't able to come until later, until we were, you know, I can't remember if it was like 2 weeks before shooting or a week. We didn't have a lot of prep. So it was really, the production designer and I were really doing all the scouting together on Buster.
Right. And how did you get your actor, Rami Malek?
He is amazing, and we made him an offer, and he, this was before Mr. Robot. So I think we were really quite lucky that he hadn't gone on to become the superstar that he is now, which he so deserves because he's really terrific. But so we got him the script sort of just before he broke big, and then when he showed some interest in the script, he was in New York filming Mr. Robot at the time, and so I kind of did a sneaky trick and said to, I think I said to his agents or managers, because I'm LA based, but I said, oh, it just so happens I'll be in New York on Friday and Saturday. Maybe I could meet Rami for a quick coffee while I'm there. Then I think flew myself out to New York to go meet with him, but just sort of pretended I was going to be in town. And so then we met and really hit it off, and that sealed the deal.
Right. And for him, how is it for an actor like him? I mean, to respond to a script like without the dialogues, and you know, which is more.
Well, Buster, there was. So it's a 62-page outline, and there was some dialogue written. So I don't want to give you the impression that it was completely improvised, because there was some scenes were sort of more fully scripted than others. But it read, I think he sort of liked it, because it's a weirdo document. It had like drawings in it. It didn't look like a traditional script. And maybe he was a little sick of reading traditional scripts. I don't know. But he was like, what the hell is this? You know, got it. It was pretty weird. But then I think it reads a little bit like a short story, and so I think it really gets across the world of them. It still reads, even though it's not a traditional script, still when you're reading it, you kind of feel like you're watching the movie. So I think it was enough to get him interested.
Right. So now, Sarah, are you going to continue making films in an indie fashion as well? And because you know you have all these big studio projects, and you know that'll keep you busy. What's the plan?
I'm gonna make films any way I can, and I don't know what that future will hold really, but I'm gonna keep making them one way or another. And obviously, to go back to the question that I know you wanted me to touch on again about this COVID world and how we're gonna pursue production, I do think we as filmmakers should be responding to this moment by really kind of rethinking the stories we're telling to fit the production constraints. So I'm actually, you know, there's so much that's obviously hard for so many people's lives right now about this, but I feel like as filmmakers, we may as well seize the moment to go make smaller films with smaller cast and crew. And for me, I think that could be really fulfilling to get to work that way again.
Right. I mean, and you have pretty much perfected that art anyhow. So that portion.
That's nice of you. I hope I still remember how, because it's been a bit. You know, I took a detour into a different kind of filmmaking. So I would like to go back and see if I still have that in me.
Do you have? I mean, I'm sure you still have many vivid memories from your days of when you had made your first film, and when you were how long did it take for you to make your first film, and you know how
my first feature? It took a long time to get there. Yeah, I think it was at least 7 years of trying to make a feature film before I did this one. And it was a lot of trying to make bigger films and get them financed and having them fall apart. And actually, Shaheen, my cinematographer, just begging me to go make a super low budget improv indie film, but I was really stubborn because I thought, oh, I need more budget, I need more money for my vision. And so he was so patient, and of course told me so many times to go make the micro budget film, and I never listened to him. And then Jonico Donnelly, my producer, her husband's also a director named Daniel Stam, who did The Last Exorcism along with a lot of other great films. And he was the one who kind of finally got through to me. Shaheen wasn't able to, but then I finally listened to Daniel when he said, go make a micro budget film. And I finally did it.
I mean, it's amazing that you got that push from the people, and you finally did it. I know a lot of people do have this. They do want to make the film, with the optimum budget, with the optimum cast, and maybe those things don't come around that easily. And often, what happens is that probably the ideas that you have, which every filmmaker has a lot of ideas, and they kind of drift away and probably sometimes become a bit stale. So I think it's very important to just go out there and do it.
Yeah,
And
I would agree. And also, I think I'm so glad I finally made, it was such a huge thing for me to finally just go make the Midnight Swim, because until you're actually doing it, you're like, I think I had an idea of who I was as a filmmaker or what filmmaking was, but all of that was just completely swept aside once we were actually finally shooting. And it taught me so much, that process. And even though it was just this tiny little micro budget film, what I learned in working with actors and working with camera from that film was my film school.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think Midnight Swim got a lot of praise for its innovative style of storytelling, the narrative that you adopted. I think it was appreciated quite a lot for that as well.
Oh, thank you.
So,
well, it's a credit. It's really a credit to the whole cast and crew, because it was like absolutely collaborative. And I think that maybe that's also maybe the most important lesson. Sorry, guys. Sorry, keeps doing that. The most important lesson to come out of the Midnight Swim was really nobody makes a film alone. It's a real myth, this myth of the auteur who sort of works alone.
Sorry to interrupt. If we get disconnected, I might start the live again. So just join once more. Just waiting for Sarah.
Hey, Shaheen, do you want to join?
So sorry about that little glitch, Sarah. Even I'm a little new to these live sessions, and I mean, our conversation just flew.
We got the cinematographer himself coming in. Here, sit on the couch.
And hi, Shaheen. Thank you for joining us. We've heard so much about you for the last. I mean, we had the most brilliant conversation with Sarah, and she told us so much about how you guys collaborate. Oh, nice. Hi. How you guys go about collaborating, and what geniuses you are, and of course, like that's very much visible through the films that you make together, and we just hope that you continue to do that. And I had these questions in my mind, and I asked Sarah, and I want to hear from you as well. Now, she's a director who also
Maybe
writes.
I should leave the room so he can give you his honest answers.
Not at all. I mean, the amount of years for which you two have collaborated, I think honesty has been there, and that's been the key. So, Shaheen, what I was thinking that Sarah being the director, the writer, and also the editor, her ideas, and also the producer. So her ideas are already pretty clearly etched out, must be pretty clearly etched out in her mind. And how do you, get in and make your own space, or how do you guys make a space, a creative space for both of you there?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good question. I think like even from the beginning, we always like work from since we're working, we're married, we live together. Even from the idea when she's conceiving the idea, we're like talking about it and kind of brainstorming and sharing ideas. I'm a good post to sort of like spitball against and try ideas against. She's obviously in control of the arc of the story and how we're gonna go about doing it, but I get to sort of like be involved from the ground up, from early on, like just even like the early first drafts of the script. I'll get to read and immerse myself in the world. So I really feel like I have like a good kind of like front row seat to the process, and I enjoy the process too because it's like we've always worked together in a certain yin and yang fashion where you know, at certain times we'll be taking care of certain tasks. You know, if it's in pre-production, then I will be fixating on like lensing and lighting and and stuff like that. And then if we're in production, we're shot listing and trying to figure out like the sort of like the key frame of the scene and the key situation of the scene together.
And your first film, the first feature film, you had a very tiny crew of just 7 people, where you were the operator, you were the gaffer, and you were donning a lot of hats.
Yeah.
So how did that you know and it's a first feature film. You were working with something that I have discussed in depth with Sarah, a scriptment. So a lot of things were impromptu also. So
Yeah.
how are you guys managing your what was it all nicely streamlined, or did you have to struggle? What
We
what were your struggles?
we actually we tried really hard to shoot that one in chronological order. So that was one way of saving our heads.
Midnight
Like,
Sun.
is that
Yeah.
what we're talking about? The Midnight
Yeah,
Swim?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
forgot we did that. You think you're
yeah.
right. We was
The
chronological.
Midnight Swim we shot kind of, and we you were really making a strong effort to shoot it in chronological order. There were not
A few
everything was.
exceptions,
There were
yeah.
a few exceptions, but that really helped with everyone's headspace, like where we were in the story. And since it was POV and we weren't doing a lot of traditional coverage, I really that was such an enjoyable experience because that's like the closest I ever got to like acting or being part of like the scene as an actor, not just as a camera or cinematographer, but like putting a lot more intention in the camera work and the handheld because I'm playing the
She's
role of
playing. Yeah, he was playing
of
the role of June.
June,
Of
yeah.
the main
Right.
And then also like cool moments where Lindsay Burge, who plays June, actually operated the camera herself.
Yeah,
And,
I was saying that, or we would like position her behind you to like
Yeah.
tap your shoulder of like, this is what my character feels like she might want to look at. And so it's like this great
yeah,
collaboration.
and actually, I remember early on in the shoot, when we were starting, and we were starting at the very beginning of the film and stuff, and I remember her coming up to me and saying, like, having a really good discussion as to like how she would actually hold the camera and the things that she would and wouldn't do that from developing her character with you.
I remember that too, and I remember us realizing the pace of the character together, of realizing that her character moves very slowly and kind of deliberately, and that really started to guide our camera work.
Yeah, exactly. I started off kind of like almost too frenetic, and then everyone sort of like, and that's the other thing that helps, but only having a single camera and like being fixated on one image and one story sort of thing at a time, is that you can kind of check that and see where you're going. And then Sarah was editing the film as we were making it, so that helped too.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. It's good to have
Oh, yeah?
more details than I do.
Yeah, I'm the elephant in the family. I remember everything.
Yeah, I'm the monkey.
So you were editing while you were filming.
That's
That's a
right.
lot of work.
I totally forgot that. That's so right. Everyone else would all the cast and crew would go drink whiskey and make dinner together, and I'd be editing up in because we were all living in that same house when we were shooting. But I was editing as we went because probably because it was a unscripted thing to make sure we got everything as we were going too, and to sort of because I was building the story in real time, so I was doing rough edits every night. I totally forgot about that. That's really funny. Blacked it all out.
We had relatively short days because we were dealing with, we didn't have like a lighting package, like an enormous lighting package, and we were in the fall, so days were short, and our night shoot stuff, and our day. So our days were short, so Sarah would like use the other half of the day to edit, and then.
Do you remember the one of the first shoots we did? We tried to do a night for night shoot, but we didn't have the light support.
Yeah,
we ended up having to redo that.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
day for night.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that there were definitely some major DIY situations in that film.
And how many days did you shoot the film in?
So that one we did in 14 or 15, and then
it was 14, and then
there was 3
one day in LA where it was like we were picking up like the green screen shoots,
and then there was like there was like B-roll, like microscope footage and stuff like
it
that.
sort of wasn't a full production day, but like we went to this something called the Lakeside Lab and worked with a scientist to gather water from the lake and shoot through the microscope.
Right. Okay, so Jennifer has one more anecdote for us, which is the characters had to write letters to other characters and slip them to them right before the scene.
That's right. I had the it was so collaborative with the actors, as I was saying, and they really owned those characters. So as part of that exercise, and we didn't really have rehearsal time, if I'm correct, right, Jen? It was like you guys got there like a day before or something. It wasn't a lot of rehearsal time, so we had to form those relationships fast. So I had them, each actor, write the other characters' letters and said, I don't want to know what's in them. It's none of my business. Seal the envelope. And then it was just a way for me, like over the course of the film, to every once in a while something was getting stale, or I thought we might be able to find another layer, to then deliver those sealed envelopes to those actors. And it would like kind of inform, probably the act of writing the letter was informative, but then also sort of it helped deepen the relationship as the other actors would receive those letters. Did I get that right, Jen? No rehearsal. We started shooting the day after we arrived. Yeah, it was fast and furious.
I would strongly recommend people to watch The Midnight Swim because it's inspiring in so many ways. Shot in 15, let's say 16 days at max, and with a budget of somewhere close to about 37 lakh. If I have to translate it to the Indian currency, and that's a challenge which is not easy, and the film was so appreciated for a lot of things that it dealt with and how it dealt with the narrative style and everything.
You should. I'm happy to. Anybody who isn't able to get it in India, just let me know, and I'll send them a free link. So we'd be happy for more people to see it.
That's so awesome. I mean, that'll be so great, and at least, especially for the cinematographers collective, and whoever reaches out to us, we would love to share the film because, like somebody asked in our previous conversation, Shaheen, when you were not with us, we briefly touched upon this topic of how things are going to move forward post-COVID. And, Sarah and I were discussing, and Sarah had this point of, figuring out a way to work with smaller crews. And it is the time now for people to get creative, innovative.
Shaheen, you should tell them about this. You should tell them about the movie you just shot before Birds of Paradise. How fast and furious that was. That was a tiny.
Oh yeah, we did one in September with this director Ricky Bates, and we shot it in 9 days.
Wow!
It's 8 characters. Is like fully. I don't know. It was fully scripted. It wasn't improv.
It was scripted, but it was tiny cast and crew, right?
Yeah, tiny cast and crew, but it was a larger budget than Midnight Swim because that was the only way to do it in 9 days is to like throw a lot more crew at those 9 days versus a small crew and then stretching out the schedule over
Right.
longer. So.
I mean, it's not easy. It can be really exhausting, but at the end of the day, I think what also matters is finally being able to create something.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
you know, and in a way that you would want to. And just to give a bit more context to people who have joined here, that Sarah did that, made the film, and now her journey has taken another leap. You are directing bigger shows, and you're making it all possible. So I think a lot of it it becomes possible if you take the first step, like and I mean, Sarah did inform us, Shaheen, that you for the longest time you were trying to convince her that she should go ahead and make her.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
I never listened.
Every
She was
script that
always
she
right.
wrote was like $300 million budget.
Yeah, I
like,
kept writing way too big of scripts.
I'm like, wait, this is about 2 towns each having their own castle. I'm like, this is...
Sometimes you don't
Right.
listen to sometimes you don't listen to the people who are closest to you, unfortunately. And it wasn't until someone
Well, and also it's like you already have it's such a battle. Even the simple format that Midnight Swim is, it's such a battle even to put it together. It's such an epic battle to make a film that why not start somewhere that's like just a little more simpler and less like.
Yeah. I think the moral of the story is definitely don't wait. There's never going to be a time when everything is exactly right. So you might as well just go make something now and don't wait, because you're going to learn so much from that experience, and it'll just make you even better moving forward.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect way to, I think, sum up our brilliant conversation. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you so much, Sarah and Shaheen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so honored that you were interested to talk to us. So thank you for watching our movies, and just do let me know anybody who wants a link. We're happy to share it, and thank you guys.
No, we would definitely want the link. I'll coordinate with you personally to make sure that happens. So thank you guys, and keep creating these.
It's so cool to connect with you guys. Mwah.
Thank you.